It's the oil, or Stop Being Stupid, Part 23 by Anna von Reitz, reading from AnnaVonReitz.com. Today, the world is aflutter with news and disgruntlement about Donald Trump's executive orders re-enlivening the oil pipeline projects that Obama and the Army Corps of Engineers shut down. He's the chief executive of a worldwide conglomerate whose lifeblood depends upon oil. What do you expect him to do? The interesting question isn't why is Donald Trump doing this, but rather why didn't Obama do this? The UN Corporation, not to be confused with the United Nations, chartered in 1945, founded in France during World War II, gave birth to the IMF Incorporated, not to be confused with the International Monetary Fund, also birthed in France at the end of the Second World War, which acquired the United States Incorporated, styled as all capital letters, at Bretton Woods, basically via a successor to contract assignment from FDR. The International Monetary Fund, like the Federal Reserve, is an international consortium of banks and investors functioning as a central bank of central banks. So you have a public corporation, IMF, and a private association, International Monetary Fund, running it. Just as you have the public corporation, Federal Reserve, styled as all capital letters, and the private association running it, Federal Reserve, styled in upper and lower case. This allows the banking associations running these corporations a very free hand to meddle as they please without any substantial risk to their member banks and their investors and officers. They can pillage at will behind the so-called corporate veil on one hand, and then sanctimoniously huff and puff and stand on their right to privacy on the other. So they conduct almost all their actual important business in private member meetings never open to the public, do their dirty work in peace, and then just make announcements and hold schmoozing sessions with insiders and trading partners before and after. This is also why there is no sane and regular auditing of the Federal Reserve, nor of the IMF, for that matter. All the dirty dealings with these private bankers' clubs are to one extent or another claimed to be private, and when that's not sufficient, they allege that their wheeling and dealing is a state secret, which is a good trick, considering that the only states they have are fictional. Anyway, it's been roughly 45 years since Tricky Dicky Nixon ousted silver as the basis for the United States dollar, USD, and created the petrodollar instead. This attached the value of the United States dollar to the value of oil, both crude and refined. These commodities became the assets backing the USD instead of silver. Please note that the United States dollar, styled as all capital letters, is a private corporate currency, and the United States dollar, styled as upper and lowercase lettering, also known as the American dollar, is and has always remained a unit of measure of fine silver. United States dollar, USD, styled as all caps, does not equal United States dollar, USD, styled as upper and lowercase. But both are asset-backed currencies. The asset-backed one is oil, the asset backing the other. The asset backing one is oil, the asset backing the other is silver. As fewer and fewer people have insisted on using lawful money, the supply of silver dollars and silver and gold coins in general has dwindled, but there are still 500 million silver dollars in circulation and far more silver half dollars, quarters, and dimes, so that the actual people of the United States who are non-citizen nationals, state nationals, continue to have sufficient quantities of actual silver dollars for their trading needs, and by international law they continue to have the right to denominate any funds passing through their hands or bank accounts as lawful money. That means the money they use has to be considered specie money, actual money having value in and of itself like a gold coin, even if it's transferred around in the form of Federal Reserve notes or United States notes. It also means that all digits representing funds in their bank accounts have to be considered their asset, not the bank's. Naturally, banks frown upon this stipulation, but it is the law, and it has to be the law, or every bank in America would have have to be closed down as a crime syndicate, as it would be very inconvenient indeed to carry around a gallon of crude oil every time you wish to buy a gallon of milk. They more or less have parity in the marketplace. A system of legal tender promissory notes, rather than certificates, coupons for redemption, has been used to facilitate and exchange the value for the petrodollar. Thus, the USD continues to be used in the form of notes guaranteed by the value of oil, both crude and refined, and the value of the USD, styled as all lowercase, continues to be guaranteed by the value of fine silver. Both are asset-backed, and the only thing tricky about this is the same deliberate confusion created by the use of deceptively similar names that we have seen elsewhere. Now, Donald Trump has been elected President of the United States, styled as all caps, a foreign, mostly private-owned international conglomerate in the business of providing governmental services, among other things. The United States, all uppercase, currency depends on the value of oil, both crude and refined. This means that when OPEC went crazy with the oil embargo, and when more recently the price of gasoline topped $5 per gallon at the pump, the profits made by the United States in the commodities market of the world were enormous on the so-called backside of the transaction, and nobody in Washington, District of Columbia, cared if you had to dig deeper into your piggy banks to get to work and school and pay your light bill. This also means that Donald Trump, as CEO of the United States, has every reason in the world to kiss oil company rump and kiss Saudi rings, and name the former CEO of Exxon as his VP, and bust through as his Secretary of State, and bust through every obstacle on earth to supply oil refineries and crude oil, build transcontinental oil pipelines until the cows come home, and ruthlessly quash the development of any new energy technology that the United States doesn't own and control. You see, the United States Incorporated is in a lot of other businesses now besides just providing governmental services. They've been in the oil business since the Second World War. They are the world's #1 exporter of defense technology and have been for decades. They are also in the drug business, the insurance business, the pension services business, the securities business, the banking business. Lord knows, they just tried to take over the entire healthcare sector too. Last time I looked, the United States, through its municipal and pension fund associations, own the majority interest in virtually every Fortune 500 company. And at the heart of the octopus, the very center, is Wall Street, the biggest casino on earth, where the daily trading and manipulation of the value of stocks, commodities, and bonds allows the monopoly interest of the United States to exert a stranglehold on competitors, forcing them to pay protection money as, quote, taxes, or plaguing them with federal agencies, aka corporate mercenaries, enforcing federal regulations under color of law. The United States, styled as all caps, has become so predatory, so reckless, so lawless that many corporations are refusing to do business here, and others are fleeing to happier shores overseas. Even the banks can smell the stench of corruption, gross self-interest, and a filthy business environment. And you know it has to be bad, bad, bad when that happens. Donald Trump is a good enough executive to know that he has to fix that. It's bad for business. So that's why you're seeing him wave the olive branch and making nice towards other big corporate interests, promising them tax shelters and deregulation and other favors to make this a tolerable place to stay. It's basically Big Brother saying, "Oh, I'm sorry, guys, I won't beat you up anymore. Promise," after 50 years of doing exactly that. He's also savvy enough to know that Americans, the people victimized the most by the United States, are waking up and ready to regurgitate. So he has to walk a fine line in all these endeavors. The United States has devolved into a fascist empire, and that is not what the American people are owed. As my father once explained to me, the communists steal everything and pay for everything. The fascists steal everything and make you pay for everything too. No need for politics or idealism to enter into it. Dad always cut to the chase, and having seen the worst of Hitler's Germany, he knew what to think when the heirs of Standard Oil helped set up the IMF and took over the United States. See this and over 700 other articles on Anna's website, AnnaVonReitz.com. You spell it ANNAVONREITZ.com. Find the PayPal button and give generously to support her work. It's the Media, or Stop Being Stupid, Part 24, reading from AnnaVonReitz.com. When I was a kid, I would come home from school with some piece of popular psychobabble. My mother would always rear back and look at me closely and ask, "Where did you hear that?" If the answer was a teacher or some other unfortunate adult, Mother had a way of going to the source and correcting things on the spot. Otherwise, the answer was always the same: consider the source. This is what we all desperately need to be doing with the mainstream media. I've told you this story before, but will tell it to you again because it's something that you can all do and easily prove for yourselves. Back in the 1980s, my husband, I, and a small group of about 8 friends did a little experiment. We all agreed to listen to one or another of the popular nightly news programs, CBS, ABC, NBC, and BBC at that time. This involved a piece of paper divided into 4 columns headed Sex, Death, Both, or Other, with an extra column for the date of the show. As we watched news stories, we would tick off whether the report concerned sex, death, both, or other content entirely. What we found is that an absolutely astronomical and totally unlikely percentage of reports involve sex and or death and nothing else of redeeming value. Just that, sex and or death. We also noticed that there was no apparent rhyme or reason for any of it. Why, for example, did the traffic death of a teenager in LA make front page news nationwide, but hundreds of similar deaths all over the country never made a mention on page B16 of the local paper? Are your Shinola sensors going off yet? And what possible good did it do any of us to know about the traffic death of a teenager in LA? Was there any lesson in the story that could save us or someone in our family a similar fate? Some problem that we could solve and make sure other such deaths wouldn't occur? No, there wasn't. So what possible reason, benefit, or value was there in listening to such a news report? None we could think of. The media was just selling us sex and death on the rocks, straight up, no reason or redeeming action or benefit implied. That then prompts one to ask, why? The short answer is that dwelling on senseless sex and death information makes us feel both aroused and afraid, 2 conditions that make us overall more willing to buy consumer goods and accept more and more and more government intervention and control. It's a simple enough recipe when you look at it, and it's also clear who benefits. The government gets to sell you more services and gets to control you at your own request because they have succeeded in making you feel scared, depressed, helpless, and in need of such services to protect you and yours from nameless universal disaster. The fact is that more government services wouldn't have saved the teenager in LA, but that doesn't matter. Your brain is thinking in this higher state of critical isn't thinking in this higher state of critical review and logic. Instead, when that cute gecko appears hawking Geico, government employees, insurance corporation, insurance products, you are ready to go out and buy. And when the latest, greatest wonder drug ad for immortal life pills follows, you are desperate enough to ignore the long list of potential adverse side effects. Sitting in front of the boob tube night after night, you've been duped into thinking that you are doing so to catch the nightly news, when in fact, what you have been conditioned to do is watch an endless recitation of disaster and titillation that doesn't help you in any practical way. This does, however, net you a little shot of adrenaline provided by your own body You aren't a news addict, you're an adrenaline addict, so you keep coming back and doing this absurd abusive ritual to your own detriment reliably night after night. You are quite literally hooked. It's the best behavioral training since Pavlov's dog, and you just lap it up and the mainstream media just goes on heaping the plate. After you've learned to turn off the news or just scan the headlines for anything of actual value, you'll notice that you eat a lot less and sleep better at night and generally enjoy better health. This is because chronic long-term abuse of your adrenaline response is no longer occurring. You can easily test and confirm what I'm telling you for yourselves, and I highly recommend that you do so. Keep a tally, and instead of just mindlessly listening to the purported news as if it really is news, listen to it critically and question the content. Why am I hearing about this? What good does it do me to know? How does it matter? What can I do about it, if anything? Nothing? So why am I sitting here listening to this? Click. I keep an ear half cocked for anything of real importance, but news stories of importance tend to be few and far between and quickly buried, because frankly our media is attuned to do everything and anything but provide you with news. When they do so, it's an accident. Their real mission is to sell you stuff and entertain you and influence you. That is, skew your decision-making process. Anything that does anything not in alignment with these goals is a waste of capital investment, and from the standpoint of the media moguls, is to be strongly discouraged. Anything that might wake you up or empower you to think for yourself or notice the little man behind the curtain is worse. Many gallant journalists have seen their careers go down in flames and have faced unemployment, ridicule, professional ostracism, and not a few have faced death in order to bring you actual news. For your own survival and your country's survival, it is essential to encourage and make use of alternative news sources and to learn to recognize real journalism, the real journalists, when you catch a fleeting glimpse of it. They still exist, and more keep stubbornly appearing. Malcolm X once famously said, "Only a fool lets his enemy educate his children." Taking a little license to paraphrase the same truth, only a fool lets his enemies control his media. When you look at who owns the media in America, it's immediately apparent that that is exactly what we do. The vast bulk of media outlets in America are owned by 6 foreign multinational conglomerates, and those organizations are aligned more or less with foreign banks and foreign governments that have access to grind and motives to promote disinformation and influence our opinions, often to our own detriment. As my mother said all through my childhood, consider the source. When Britain wants us to get involved in a nasty little war for profit, guess what? We get plenty of news about ISIS from the mainstream news organizations aligned with the British banks and the British government storefront. We're also shown beheadings and children being burned alive in wire cages in order to provoke all those yummy adrenaline rushes, and at the same time outrage us enough so that we're willing to take violent action against the criminals. And all the while the real criminals are funding ISIS and promoting these bestial activities for pay and sitting smug in Westminster playing cards. The BBC grinds the British axis, the Time Warner Group grinds the US axis, Fox Network goes back and forth and mostly to the highest bidder, and on it goes. All you have to do is look up the ownership of these corporations, and it's easy enough to see how and why the news you get is skewed. The sex and death propaganda remains much the same as it was in the 1980s, and the only recent change has been the addition of false happy propaganda. This is a far distant second in terms of mainstream news content, and even more distasteful in a way, because it's even more deceptive. This brand of propaganda encourages you to believe good things that simply aren't true. They give you a different kind of addictive high by encouraging a little jolt of serotonin released in your brain. This makes you feel good and keeps you coming back for more. The sad part is that, like Santa Claus, this is more distortion of the truth, and ultimately leads to disappointment and disillusionment. Beware of news that sounds too good to be true, because 99% of the time it is too good to be true. It's just the same old cads playing a different tune and seeking to lull you into fat, dumb, and happy, patient complacency, and by default, complicity. Millions of Americans who have begun the process of awakening have been at least momentarily sidetracked and derailed by tales of gallant, behind-the-scenes military action in their behalf, arresting and removing the bad guys, emptying out and destroying vast underground bases, repurposing FEMA camps, forcing the rats in Congress to sign legislation restoring the republic and providing remedy to the people, and blah, blah, blah. The truth is that the United States military forces, in which far too many American state nationals have served, either because they mistakenly thought it was their army or because of illegal conscription, have been grossly and shamelessly misled and abused for 150 years, cheated, defrauded, lied to, and left without the back pay, insurance, medical services, educational programs, and other support they are owed. Suffice it to say that all these tall tales about a wonderful new republic and near miraculous feats of military intervention to make things right in the world are, in my opinion, just the second brand of propaganda. Propaganda designed to make you believe that everything is safe and secure and all right when it isn't, and isn't going to be until you wake up and make it so. Stop believing the lies and the fairy tales, the horror stories, and the happily ever afters alike. You cannot expect what now passes for journalism to provide anything approximating a fair and balanced worldview for you. Like so many other things, discerning the truth about what is going on in the world is a DIY project that requires effort and thought and research from you. See this and other 700 other articles on AnnaVonReitz.com. Find the PayPal button, give generously, and you spell it ANNARVONREITZ.com.